Osio, Doichu, Dodo Kunokhale Danadoknagiski. Hello again, this is Chief Eagle Spirit Dancing of the Cherokee Blackfeet Cultural Circle. Here to present you with another, address on various indigenous issues. However, today's subject is going to be not so much, just mainstream news or information with history and culture, but it's personal. A few people have asked me to do a bio because of my history, my background being of mixed descent, black and indigenous, and also being adopted. So people were wondering, how did I come about and what happened. So I basically just gave little snippets, in some of the other videos that I had, done in the past on my adoption, but nothing more comprehensive, So here it is. Here it is in a nutshell. My birth of May 15th, 1967. Yeah, I'm going to repeat that. May 15th, 1967 is when I was born in Bellevue Hospital in Lower Manhattan. And not long after I was born, I was taken away from my mother by the Bureau of Child Welfare. It was BCW at the time, because my mother had me when she was very young. She was 14 going on 15 when she had me. She was born May 19th, or May 15th. But nonetheless, and this is really personal, and I'm going to share this with you because I'm sure there are some people out there who've had some similar experiences. In my family, as in most who have suffered from a mental type of slavery, racism, etc. My grandmother was fair-skinned. On my mother's side of the family, she had an attitude about darker peoples, something that was taught to her. Ironically enough, one of her husbands was very dark-skinned. I started to believe later on, because I had judged her harshly, that she became that way because of something personal that happened to her in her personal life with one of her husbands. She was married a few times. But my grandmother, after I being born and being that my father was mixed, but at the time my father looked African American. His mother, my grandmother, was Cherokee and Catawba Indian. And being that my father was darker than my mother, my grandmother didn't see that I was worth taking, so she had me taken away from my mother, and ultimately had me put up for adoption. So it took the city of New York almost 5 years. I was placed in foster care for almost 5 years. When I was 2 years old, I ended up with my adopted parents, and both of them are deceased currently. And I have to say this: they were good people. I miss them to this very day. But ended up in quite a few foster homes. Don't remember anyone but one. I had a very traumatic experience with one of them. But my adopted mother fought for me, and ultimately won in the courts, and she got me. So it took upwards of 5 years after me being born to become settled in her house. And it was until many years later. I'm going to make this simple and short as I can. Quite a story though. When I reached 11, as I was maturing, into adolescence, I realized that I was the lightest one in my family amongst my siblings. My brothers and sisters were darker than me, African American. The only one that came out with this straight curly hair, and people were wondering, this is my hair. I just wash and blow dry it. That's all I do. There's no perms here. But nonetheless, I was the lightest one in my family, except for my parents. My parents were very, very fair, very light skinned, high yellow, if you will. And a child doesn't see color to be prejudiced against color. That's something that I always tell people. If you've forgotten, as a child, we don't prejudice against color. Children don't do that, but we see color. That's why you have an array, an assortment of colors in your crayon box that you get from your child. You see all the different colors. Bear with me 1 second. This is my son, Tecumseh. Yeah. Tecumseh? Say hi. Osio. Osio Toichu. Yeah, my boy. So, as I started to mature and I grew up with my siblings, I realized that there was a difference there. Hair texture, complexions, features, all of us were different. I started asking questions. I went to my mother and asked her, what's going on? Why we look so different? She said, we're family, and no one looks the same in family. I knew that something was not right. So I went to my brother, who was like my father's, and he told me the truth. He said, you were adopted. And ironically enough, I was the only one adopted because my siblings, their parents did not fully give them up, or albeit that my grandmother, my biological grandmother, gave me up completely. So my adopted mother, was allowed to, legally by the state, to give me their last name at the time. However, my adopted father, he saw to it to keep my mother's last name that she had gotten from her stepfather, which I thought was my grandfather. Come find out he wasn't. But nonetheless, I ended up keeping that name because my adopted father said maybe one day he'll want to go and look and search and seek out his family. Of course, my mother being a mother without children of her own, she I guess she couldn't bear, ever, losing me and me going to search out who she felt at the time was people who didn't care about me. Right? Tecumseh, you want to add something? And so, but nonetheless, she didn't argue with my father, and she allowed it. So I ended up having two last names. And, so I got older, I asked these questions, and I spoke to my brother. He told me the truth. Then when I spoke to my father, my adopted father, he also, told me the truth. When I went to my mother, she couldn't come to, be honest with me because, again, she was told when she was very young she couldn't have her own children. That's why she had adopted me and then had so many other foster children. She loved family, it's just that she couldn't have her own. So that was hurtful towards her. And it was hard for her to relinquish that. So it was a struggle, and me and my adopted mother didn't get along for many years after that. The lessons there is always be truthful to your children. Never tell your children to be honest and then you're lying to them. Never do that. That's one thing I've learned with my adoption. It affected me in a profound, good way, because I don't lie to my kids to tell them the truth. And so anyway, as I grew, of course, it had an effect on me psychologically. For many years, I couldn't function school, socially, deviated from doing a lot of things you're supposed to do as a child. Um, if it hadn't been for my foster brother, he was like my father. I mean, if it hadn't been for him, I would probably be dead, drugs, or in prison somewhere, become a statistic as a quote-unquote African Americans, because that's what I still was. I was labeled as an African American for many years, you know, and for the most part, my community, I was accepted because I kept my hair low, put some activator in it, and curled it up, you know. So anyway, as I became more and more inquisitive, you know, and learning about who I was, my foster brother taught me a lot about history. Mina? Yeah. You okay? Huh? Not so good. What's wrong with you? So bear with me 1 second. You okay? Who you are? I'm sorry, guys. Listen, this is my daughter. This is my daughter, Amina. Amina Khalifa. Her Indian name is Yucha Achila, which means. Tell them. Tell them.
Little flower.
They can't see your face. See your face.
Little flower.
Okay, she's wanted to put her 2 cents in there. Okay, this is a family here. All right, it's my kids. Anyway, I love them. I love them to death. All right. So anyway, I'm doing a bio here. So give me a few minutes, okay?
Oh, sorry.
Give me a few minutes. And getting back on track. So I really wanted to learn more. Is realizing that my own history of my family was gone to me. I knew nothing. When I asked my mother who I was ethnically, she said, "You're black, that's it." You know, and so growing up many years and telling people that was like, and especially being around Latinos, you know, Latinos, I told them I'm black, and they're like, "What? Oh, you're mixed, you got something else there, you sure you're not Spanish?" Growing up in an African American household, I could tell you with confidence, absolutely not. No disrespect, that's just what it was. So, but nonetheless, I had people come up to me many years, you know, you got some Indian in you, in my community, particularly. You know, you got India. I heard that for many years, many years. You know, I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't know if I was Spanish, I didn't know if I was Indian, I was black. I didn't know. According to the records, my mother, they said I was black. Well, my father was black, but they didn't know my father was mixed. He was black and Indian. State didn't know that. They just totally dismissed that. That's what was done historically. You know, once you got a drop of African blood in you or whatever, you're not considered to be indigenous anymore. Even though, so they totally disqualify. They totally disqualify one parent who's Indian and one parent who's black. If you have one parent who's black and one parent who's Indian, they disqualify you as being Indian at all, which is horrendous. So anyway, moving right along with that, I started to, you know, research history, and when I got old enough, I started as soon as I found out I was adopted, maybe 11, 12 years old. I started going to the phone book, going through last names that I had, you know, calling people, you know, trying to find out where my mother was. You were a child, 11, 12 years old. I was devastated. What? Who are these people? That's what went through my mind. I was scared. I was like, oh my God, who is this? If it had not been for the honesty of my brother and my father, I probably would have lost my mind, because they told me the truth. I loved them even more. And of course, then me and my adopted mother, we started to, you know, separate even more. Our relationship became estranged. So when I hit 18 years old, I started to go to places, my birth, hospital. I went to the Sheltering Arms Children's Services, And interestingly enough, I ended up getting some information that I was there. The director, looked at me, pulled me in a room. It was a white woman. She pulled me in a room and said to me, she said, "Why do you want to look for your parents?" I looked at her and said, "Because it's every human being's right to want to know who she or he is, and where they come from." She said, "You're better off for who you are. Just go and live your life." This is a white woman who told me this. And I say that because the system that we live under does not encourage people who have been lost to their families, culturally, especially the darker peoples. They don't want you to find. And I'm going to back this up with something that happened years later, another incident, right? So, I was devastated. 18, told that don't even bother go looking, just live your life. So anyway, as I bounced from door to door, place to place, I ultimately, gave up. 18, boom. I got a job working at Columbia University. Stayed there for almost 3 years, right before the war started, the Gulf War. And when I turned 22, I went out looking again. And I ended up getting close. And one time I was at the courthouse, and the courthouse that actually finalized my adoption, the court clerk, whose name John DeVita, I'll never forget him. I will never forget that SOB, excuse my language. He was still there. This was in 1989, 90, somewhere around there. And he was still there after all those years. I couldn't believe it. Spoke to the man and told him my plight. He said, "Well, first of all, your records, if you are looking to find," he said, "the only way we can dig up anything is if you have a genetic illness and we need to find one of your." And then he said, "Wait a minute, how old are you?" At the time I was 23, 24, and he said, "Oh, those records are destroyed." Now his secretary was coming in to the office and said, I could hear him as he was coming in. He said, "Oh no, wait a minute. No, his records are up in Albany. All he needs is a lawyer, to have his records, released." And Mr. DeVita sounded like a roaring lion, threatened to dismiss this man for telling me the truth about how you can go about attaining information that would be vital to me finding my family. So I'm sitting there listening to his secretary, male secretary, telling me what I need to do, and him and Mr. DeVita telling his secretary how dare he come in there, talk over, if he does that again he's going to dismiss him, etc., etc. I think we were on the 4th floor at the time. I was really, really irritated beyond measure. My blood pressure went through the roof. I wanted to take this man by. I'm thinking I'm getting so close now, and here I go again. Mr. DeVita, I believe, is Italian. Make no distinction, though. So, a little discouraged, somewhat. Mind you, I had been to the hospital where I was born when I was 18, and I ended up in the records department. I'm going back again. I'm going retro now, and I ended up in the records department where there was a bunch of women working, all different ethnicities working, Latino, white, black. And I told them I didn't give them all the information, so I was there for, a copy of my birth certificate, but I needed a letter stating I was born there, so they had to go dig up my records. I didn't give them, I wasn't forthcoming, of course. If I was, they would have dismissed me right at the door and told me to go away, young man. So they started digging, and they found my records. Ironically enough, my records were there. Then the woman said to me, "Oh, I found you, Mr. Such and Such." I'm not giving them the names. "I found you, Mr. Such and Such. Oh, I think this is your mother." Unbeknownst to me at the time, the name that she gave to my mother was in fact my mother's name. I didn't know it at the time. So as she was reading, she put the file down. She called the other woman over, and she told her. Then she sat down and says, "Look, young man, what are you really here for?" Of course, I had to be, candid. Then at that point, I was busted. And I stopped it. I'm trying to find my family. No, I'm sorry. You got to get a lawyer. Blah 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 blah. Be gone. Okay. Here I am at another, dead end. But came close, and I knew that hospital was my salvation somewhat. So when I hit 22 again, I tried to go back down there, and to no avail, nothing. They changed up the whole way people come and enter in the records. I believe that because of what I did, the records department in Bellevue Hospital changed their whole policy of people trying to get records, claiming that they're born there or whatever. So I got laid off at Columbia when I was almost 24, 25, right? And that was a blessing in disguise. So I should thank Bush for starting that war, but no, I won't go that far. But it was a blessing. The reason why is because when I got laid off, I started my own business. Promising I would never go work for anyone else again. I'm still self-employed to this day. But it was because of that. And, it was rough. Starting my own business was rough. And this all corresponds to what I'm talking about. It was hard. And I tried to get another job at the same time and establish myself, make some extra money. And I ended up for a job interview at the same hospital I was born. Coincidence? So down there, while I was there, I decided to, because the job interview, they told me, which I never got the job. They told me that I needed my birth certificate. And so my birth certificate was the old birth certificates that was the carbon, jet black, looking like stencil almost. The very old. But anyway, they told me I needed, a copy of that. So I went back to the records department. Suit and tie, fresh, looked good that day. And I ended up, going to the same area in the hospital, but they had a door cut off now for records, correspondence, and they sent me from records to correspondence and said that if I wanted a letter saying I was born there to get a copy at 125 West Street, I had to go to correspondence. I went to correspondence, and there was a gentleman that was there, and something came over me. I said, wait a minute. I'm not really coming here for a letter. The gentleman that was sitting there didn't look too bright. I'm not being disrespectful of him, and I tell you, God works in mysterious ways. I immediately sensed this. I immediately sensed, my son had to get his 2 cents in, sensed that he wasn't too bright. And basically, he asked me what I wanted and told him. And maybe he was training, he had been there that long. And the young lady who was working alongside him, when I filled out the request for information, he had to be helped out. And so when I filled it out, I gave it to him. And of course I didn't fill it out. I gave him, I gave him certain names. I gave him my first name, and I gave him my mother's maiden name. And he went with that, came back with a box. The box is about yay big. No, actually, about a foot in length, about a half a foot you know, across. And the box looked old. And I said, you know what? I bet you he has my information in his hand. And sure enough, he pulled it out. He showed me a card with my mother's name on it, which was slip of the tongue. My mother's name, which was on the box, which was on the file. My grandmother's name, my name, and then in the bottom right hand corner it says adoption do not release. And as I studied it and scanned this card like a camera taking a picture, got all of my mother's information, where she used to live, address, everything. It was less than a mile from the hospital. And then, you know, I'm looking at it, and a young lady comes out and she says, "What's going on?" So, "Oh, he's just looking at his information." And as she sees my face, I'm overtaken with emotion. And she says, "Let me see that." And she grabs the card. By that time, it didn't matter. She looks at it and she says, "Oh, no, sweetheart, I'm sorry. You can't look at this." I'm like, it's too late. This was November 9th, 1992. A day which I will never forget. And I immediately walked away and told the man, I said, "Thank you for being who you are on that particular day." He might have been a little slow, but the words cannot express what I was feeling. I walked to the elevator and I was in tears, realizing that the name I had heard when I was 18, several years earlier, was actually the name of my mother. So I was crying on the elevator. People looking at me, "You all right, sir?" "No, I just found my family, found my parents." And actually, I didn't find them yet. I just had information, but I had names, I had addresses. Coincidentally, I have a 4-year degree in private investigations, so I can't practice in the state of New York. Change of laws, you know. Right when I graduated, the requirements changed. But anyway, so I had an investigative mind, right? From that day, November 9th, it took me almost 6 days. Found out my father still lived in the neighborhood. And my grandmother, who's now deceased, my mother's mother, was still in the neighborhood. My father was there. He had heard about me coming around, women talking, and I ended up actually within 3-4 days running, going into a Catholic church that was right across the street from my father's window. And I was in the church talking to the bishop, I don't know what he was, one of the ministers. And with records, I saw records of my grandmother's name inside books, going back years, you know. And it wasn't until the church that they asked me to come to that Sunday service, which was on the 15th, and that somebody in the church would more than likely recognize me. So, you know, I was in anticipation, excitement beyond measure. So I prepared, and I had a delivery, a trucking service, and that Friday, as I was moving someone out of a building, a bucket filled with concrete dried up, fell 10 stories and hit my truck, right a foot away from the windshield. The hood, indented the hood. Never got compensated for that, as a matter of fact. Didn't have time to follow up. My mind was in other places. But that was the infamous Friday the 13th on that day. Because it was Friday, it was the 13th, and that Sunday was the 15th. So I knew something big was coming. So Sunday came, put on my Sunday's best suit and tie. I went down to the church, sat down, and there was a few ministers speaking, and the one who I spoke to, he got up, like it was the third minister. And, you know, so there was a young man who came to my attention a few days ago and said that he had looked for his family, and, you know, his name is such and such, and is anyone in here who might know him? And then he, you know, stand up, young man. And I told the people who I was, and there were two women who recognized me because they knew my father and my grandmother. And the woman was, I saw a gasp, like, oh, you know, that, oh my God, that type of look. And that's when I knew. I said, oh God, I'm close. I'm close. And my father had heard about me being at the church. And towards the end of the service, you know, the woman came to me and told me this, that, yeah, your grandmother lives down the street, I'm sure of it. And I remember your mother years ago when she was pregnant, then she disappeared, you know, yada, yada. Okay. Then next thing you know, I was in the lobby in my grandmother's building. And my father running out of his house to come meet me, knowing where I was going. Interestingly enough, the woman and I were standing in the lobby of the building. And then the door opens. I look to my left. See this man walk in, looked like me with a beard. And I said, he looked at me and said, I know you. You're my son I've been looking for 25 years now. I was 25. So I looked at him. Again, it was like looking at myself with a beard. I could not believe what I was looking at. The woman looked, screamed, and said, that's your father, that's your father, that's your father. The people getting off the elevators, looking, screaming, crying. It was a day I'll never forget. And my grandmother heard about me. You know, I don't know if she was scared or whatever the case was, but she not me not knowing anything was going on, went upstairs, saw my grandmother, hugged and, you know, kissed, and she was happy to see me. And I was shocked to find my father. That was unexpected. I was looking for my mother, not knowing I was going to find my father. The remotest part of me finding family was finding my father. Why I thought that way to this day, I don't know. And I ended up meeting my father, meeting my grandmother, and everything just exploded from there. Met all my brothers and sisters. Still one sister that I haven't found yet. I'm still looking for one last of my siblings. Her name is Wanda. She might be married now, but I know she doesn't get along with my dad too good. So anyway, from there I found the rest of my family. I found my mother. Now again, I asked my grandmother, where's my mother? She said that she was, you know, in another borough somewhere living at the time. Less than 2 weeks later, I found my mother, and the tears just rolled. I saw my brothers, my two brothers and my sister from her. And I went from being the youngest in my adopted family to the oldest overnight. From junior to senior. That was a hell of a pill to swallow. You being the youngest brother in the family all your life, and now you're the oldest. That was not easy. But that's what it was, and I had to deal with it. And I have many brothers and sisters, 9 of us all together. And I'm the eldest out of every last one of them. For my mother and my father. I was the first. First one lost, the first one found. It was an emotional experience for me when I went to South Carolina with my father's family. I finally met my grandmother. My father's mother, who was Catawba and Cherokee Indian. So I got my good looks from. And when I saw her, she was sort of incoherent, but when she saw me, she wailed. She cried. She cried, and she died not long after that because she had closure. And I went to some other family members' houses, and they showed me pictures of our family on Indian reservations. It said that those were in fact our family members who were there. I mean, the story gets longer. I don't want to get too much into detail because some things are personal. But I wanted to share that with you to give you an idea, of what happened in my life. I found my her family was also, her grandmother, my great grandmother, was Black and Cherokee Indian from North Carolina. So it's on both sides of my family. I'm the only one who came out with this texture hair in my family, from my mother and my father. And meeting my great uncle, who was dark skinned with straight hair, it just blew my mind. Found out he was a Saponi Indian. Yeah. So, that's basically, my bio. As much as I'm going to divulge to the world. So, I hope that, some people are encouraged by my story. It was an interesting one because the way things unfolded. Mina, come get your homework. Or your brother's going to tear it to shreds. So I've been asked by some people that I should do a biography or autobiography. I don't know yet. There were some personal things there that I don't know if my mother would agree with. I have to talk to people and family first if I'm going to do something like that, because there's still a lot of hurt there, a lot of racism that was been taught to my family. Pain, hurt, still there, suffering. Even though my grandmother's gone now, my adopted parents are gone. Pain is still there. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be easy for me. It wouldn't be easy. So, on that note, I want to thank you again for listening. To my bio, short version of my bio, my background, and how I became Native overnight from African American. Being of mixed parenting, and how I became to be who I am today. You can blame, or I can blame the system. Should be thanking them for what they've done to a degree. That's a strange way to look at it. Sometimes I wonder if I didn't have that drive to, because you have some people who adopted and they have no drive to find who they are. I've had people who I know were adopted and they was like, I don't care, they gave me up. I didn't see it that way. There was something that said my mother didn't give me up. She didn't. I was taken from her. Yep, I was taken from her. She never wanted to give me up. She loved me, and I knew it. There was something in the blood. I said, dude, somebody's lying. My mother couldn't be forward enough to tell me the truth. My adopted mother. But some things you just can't mess with. And the DNA. My heart knew. And that's how I know spiritually I'm connected to my indigenous. Because I heard it from the minute she told me. But she didn't want me. I heard my mother say, I love you. And I did want you. She raised all of her other children after me. She never lost not one of them. It's just that she had me too young. And I was beyond her control. On that note, I'll say, Wado, thank you. And Donada, Kahoni. We never say goodbye till we meet again.